everybody. I just realized as I watched that little video clip I built that I kind of had a ringer SG player by using that clip of John playing that 68. I'm going to do this out of order. There. This 5-Watt Live is brought to you with the support of Truefire. More about it. Good friends from Truefire and in the middle of the stream. So let's do this out of order part. That was John Cordy playing a 68 SG Special that he borrowed from Francisco, quote, up the road. He's playing it into a 2-rock that he had for a short time. And that clip is just amazing. I don't think he used that for any videos, but he sent it to me. I'll use it. I will use it gladly. I've been talking to some friends about putting together a 5-watt country blues jam here at the house, something that I would host here. And something electric that would sort of go along with my monthly acoustic jam that I have that I go to. This would be like a couple, 3 friends, 5-watt, actually friends of 5-watt from the area, people that I know, a bass player and a guy, I'll mention him in a minute, that I've become friends with, who is a local guitar collector and really a great player, has a big background in country. So this would be like country blues, kind of outlaw blues kind of stuff. It forced me to sing a little more, forced him and the bass player to sing. Still trying to figure out the volume level. So I commented about that. I started thinking about, how to limit the volume. I have absolutely zero interest in having an additional electric deaf fest, as I used to call them. I played those with friends in Vermont in a basement of a friend for many years, and my ears are still ringing. And I'm not kidding, they're ringing right now, to remind me of those times. Of course, I was talking to my good friend David Barber about this, and his insights led to setting up this live stream. I'm going to tell you that story in a second. BB is not here today, but I asked him to share his at-home rig, and I'm going to squeeze that in right now. He said, to be honest, doesn't apply to him that much, as the studio can be very loud or not loud, as it needs to be, whether or not the job requires that, or he's playing or he's playing himself. He says, now if he's traveling and staying in hotels, he rehearses. If he needs to rehearse, he plays through a set of Boss Waza Air amp headphones that they sent to him right before they were released in 2019. And very occasionally, very occasionally, he said he uses a Princeton with a 12-inch Alessandro speaker in the open plan living space at home, but usually he just walks through over to the studio, which is connected to a space, I guess. That's the news from Bebe. Everybody behave themselves, because Bebe is working hard tonight somewhere in Europe. See the description for the links to the online store for t-shirts, hoodies, hats. Also the links for the Friends of 5-Watt on Patreon, and the link if you want to get one of the 5-Watt Barber buses. I think we have them in both colors now. The links should be in the description for both the white ones and the black ones. Just to get out ahead of it, those 2 models are exactly the same. I don't think we're working on something else, a couple of different things, but we won't talk about that. That's a history. I can see David in the green room squirming in his chair as I mention it. So the links are there for the 5-Watt World buses. They're black or white, your choice. I have both. They're lovely, amazing things. Remember, if you have a question or a comment that you want me to see, I've got that over on this side of the screen. So put question marks and space. Otherwise, I will assume you're all talking to each other, which is great. You always encourage the hang. So let's get started. As I said, the intro is John Cordy. Let me bring David on, and I'll tell the story while he's here. David, our good friend David Barber. And there he is.
Hey there.
Did you know could you tell I was going to bring in, or you just like?
I had no idea.
I told David
walking through my basement. The next thing you know, I'm live.
he's in full Bukovac wardrobe. That's David's wardrobe. There you go. So I just got the 2020 SG that's back over in the corner there. Hey, does everybody want to see it? Let me get it. Actually, and I'll talk about the guitar that's on the other side. So we'll talk guitar. We'll do guitar show and tells first. The funny thing is, this guitar is much redder on camera than it is in person. In person, it's kind of orangey, really faded red. It's a really nice couple of pieces of mahogany that are glued together. Nice grain. And I'm very surprised at how much I'm enjoying playing this. This came from a conversation that I had with Rick, and I'm working on a video about it. This came from my country blues buddy. It is a Danocaster. I returned the two Murphy Labs to him, and he's like, "Hey, take a Danocaster with you." I'm like, "Oh, okay, if I have to." It's a thin line. I'll bet you this guitar weighs about 6 pounds, and it's it's relic the way Dan Strain does, the master himself. Very cool guitar, very acoustic sounding. I should save it with the decibel conversation, but we're going to let David do all that fun stuff today. All right, there. It's kind of like on watch channels. They say, what are you wearing today? That's what's in the room. That's what's in the room here. Okay, so I got the 2020 SG. I've been playing at a living room rig, which is a Rev D25 and my Gibson GA40 clone that has a master volume post-phase inverter master volume that it was added by Dan Lurie when he designed it. And I commented to David that playing the 5-watt World Barber bus on the two different modes, the overdrive special mode and the bluesbreaker mode, that the guitar, that guitar in that setup made those two modes sound more different than other guitars I'd been playing it through. And David said, I assumed it was like pronounced mids, and I was saying all those kinds of things, and to which David responded, "How loud is your amp?" I was like, "How loud is the amp? What's that got to do with it?" And at which point David related to me that he thought that the guitar, that the big part, at least part of the difference of what I was hearing was the guitar in the room. When I told, I skipped the part where I said not very loud. The amps are not very loud at all. They're kind of barely on. That's how I run the thing. I actually do that from the HX Stomp. I just dial it back. And David said, well, it's probably the sound of that particular guitar in the room, the sound of the guitar coming from, not from the pickups and the amplifiers, but from the sound of it sitting in my lap, now on a strap, as everyone has told me, SGs should be played after I, achy old man that I was, playing the thing on my lap for a couple of days. But that story is what led to the rabbit hole of what we're hearing and what we're playing plugged in, even when we think we're playing quietly. How'd I do? Is that pretty much how it happened? More or less, David?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Sounds right to me.
All right.
That could be your story.
That's the story. I'm sticking to it. It's great to have you back on the live, man.
Thanks. I appreciate being here.
Yeah.
In my basement and on YouTube.
You're glad to be in your basement and on a hot day in Maryland today, or southern Pennsylvania.
Well, pretty close to the line. So
I was asking people. I'm always asking people about the weather. So Veronica was here. She said it's going to be that it's humid and 70 something, 67.3. Brr.
Basement temperature.
Yes, it is. So I think a fun way to start this, boys and girls and boys, would be to have everybody put in the chat what decibel you think bedroom volume is. All right. So start putting in the chat what you think, how many dBs do you think is bedroom volume?
Do we need to define how loud a typical speaking voice is to maybe give them a reference?
I'm going to do that right now. I think this would be a fun way to start, and I want people to be here. Sean Tubbs is here. Sean, if you're a ringer, give your answer. Everybody gets to have an answer, right? I know Jeff is here, and Jeff knows because I already told him the answer. But I think it would be a fun way to think, because David said, well, what do you think it is? And I guessed. I got it completely wrong, way off. I asked Jeff this morning. He actually guessed the same that I did, completely wrong. Oh, great. People are loading it in. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So David busted out his dB meter because he's David. He always had his dB meter there. I got mine. Mine is old enough that it came from Radio Shack. But it's a very good one. And
I have one of those. It works.
Do you? There you go. David's.
Yeah.
Well, we'll come back to where you got yours. So before he goes busting it out, we're going to do a lot of checks today for reference. But for reference, the average speaking voice is around 50 dB. And I actually went online.
52.
52 and louder if you're David. We'll come back to that too.
I think it's 50 to 60 or 66, 65 is typical. It's what they said. Or they just say 50.
I'm going to read it.
Okay.
So I went on the.
I haven't said anything in a while. It's already 4:11. I
went on the internet and found a definition from the National Institute on Deafness and Communication Disorders, and that definition is that the average speaking voice, the average decibel level of human speech is estimated between 55 and 65. A whisper is considered the lowest level of human speech, and a whisper is generally between 20 and 30 dB. And on the other hand, a human scream can reach decibel levels between 80 and 125. Keep loading them in there, boys and girls, because we've got this. We've got this. So
some of them are rather realistic in their expectations.
Yeah, exactly. That's
you have not been. Although if you have not been realistic in their expectations.
No, I love that. So, and somebody actually, Sound Music actually says that the iPhone has a dB reader app. We're going to touch on that. I want to go on and read this additional definition because I think this is always the context. It's not just how loud is it, but how loud is too loud is always a part of this conversation. We're going to do how loud is it in the room. But again, from the National Institute on Deafness and Communication Disorders, sounds at or below 70 A-weighted decibels, and David's going to help define that. We have a chart, are generally safe even after long exposure. However, long or repeated exposure to sounds at or above 85 dBA can cause hearing loss. And the louder the sound, the shorter the amount of time it takes for hearing loss to occur. A single loud noise at or above 120 dBA can cause immediate hearing loss. All right. So you want to do the definition? I always like to do a definition of terms. This is like I spent too much time in higher education. So should we do dB and dBA first? Should we do the chart?
Yeah, you can show the chart. That's a good idea. Or the dBA and dBc, which is what most people deal with when they have a decibel meter. And there's usually some confusion as to why they would use either the A or the C weighting.
Okay, so we grabbed this off the internet at the very last minute before we went live. So we assume that this is correct, though this gives David a chance to go ahead. And so walk us through A, C, and Z weighting.
Okay, well, Z weighting is the one that most decibel meters don't have, but it represents, as you can see, pretty much a flat line across 0 dB as being the reference point. So that's what everybody would most likely think that a decibel meter is going to do, is that it's going to measure all sounds equally from, the lowest frequency the microphone's capable of picking up that's built into the decibel meter to the highest. And hopefully that'll cover human speech and hearing too, mainly hearing, not so much speech. But what most of them have is the A weighting selected. And that's the one that you usually see if you're looking for a rating of how loud a car is, and they show that a car was 66 decibels. Well, it's 66 decibels A weighted usually. And if you look at our little graph here, or our graphic, they're throwing away at 10 hertz, 70 decibels. Now with a car, it's the stuff that happens below 200 hertz, which as you can see is already still cut. At 200, we're down 10 decibels from where 1K would be. By the time you get to 100 decibels, you're 20 decibels down. So, I'm sorry, 100 hertz, you're at 20 decibels down. So they're throwing away lows because the concept is how loud is the compartment of the car when you're trying to talk to someone else? Can you talk? For our purposes, you probably want to be more like the C weighting if you have a choice between an A and a C, because it'll allow you to include the bass player if you're trying to measure how loud the bass is. And if you're a bassist and the 1K measurement doesn't matter as anywhere near as much to you as the reading that goes down to, C, I'm looking at the scale here, still not too far off, around 80 hertz, which is the bottom of a 4-string bass. It's like 79 or 80 hertz is the lowest string. If you play a 5-string, 32, 34, something like that for the B string, I think is how many hertz that is. Still not too bad. That'll give you a more accurate rating. So I would definitely recommend you use a C weighting whenever possible. And as you can see, with A weighting, the primary thing that they go for is 1K. That's the big, the big show for it.
And they're trying to do that because they're emphasizing, can you hear people speak?
That's it. Will this thing cover speech? Because
Right.
speech is roughly around the range that's left over with A weighting. There's other reasons for it, but that's how it's ended up being used in practice.
Yeah.
So there are other definition reasons of why A and C weighting exists that don't fit that.
My old dB meter, old but very, very lightly used dB meter, has a switch for turning weighting on, different weightings on and off, and you can change it from A to C. Those are the only two weighting choices, by the way, on here.
Yeah,
So,
mine has.
yes.
No, hold on, my face is in the picture. Don't want that.
Yeah, got it.
But it's got A and C, just like yours does. And then it's got the ability to hold the highest peaks.
Okay, there you go. Yep.
And there's a fast and a slow also. Sometimes that can be helpful with this. I usually use it on fast because we're trying to get transients of guitar.
Yep, it lets me adjust that
Right.
as well. Cool.
Okay.
All right, well, there's a lot of people when as David brings his mind back into focus, there's a lot of people immediately commented that there are really cool, that's their words, not mine, dB meters in their phones.
Yeah, they have great graphics.
Why is that problematic, David? Because you said this to me and I was ready to say the same thing. I'm going to get one of those things and I'll just always have it. And it'll be, yeah.
The great graphics are the awesome part of them, and they have lots of features, and they can usually be used as spectrum analyzers and all kinds of things. The downside is there's so many phones, and they don't make apps that necessarily take the microphone input circuitry, which is designed for telephone speech, into account. And so usually there's some lows that are stripped out, and a lot of these softwares, these apps have adaptive software of some sort to try to make up for the changes that would be necessary to make a good phone for talking on, but not necessarily measuring audio. So I tested a lot of the different apps, and what I found was with some of them, you can find a specific frequency range that they're fairly accurate next to a real meter. The thing is, you're going to need a real meter to check it, to see how your app is in comparison to something like a $50 meter. And so, you know, a $50 meter, if you've already got yourself into $1,000 or more guitar, a $500 or more amplifier, you have to ask yourself, can you spend $50 on a meter?
Yeah.
I'd say, yeah, because it's your hearing, which is the only piece of equipment that really matters in the room.
Yeah, kind of like the way we used to, when I was doing track days on my Ducati, they used to say you should only spend as much money on your helmet as your head is worth. I think dB meters probably fall in that same category for a musician.
Yeah, somewhat aligns with that. So I wouldn't use an app to rely on. I found most of them to be off by 3 to 6 decibels pretty easily, which is a significant amount for them to be off. And then even if they aligned with mine at like 1K, if I went down to 200K and played because of course I have a noise generator, and played a noise generator tone, and then measured it on my real decibel meter and then measured on the app would be way off. Even though they agreed at 1K, they didn't agree at all the rest of the frequencies, even though their weighting was set the same. So
interesting.
And I trust the decibel meter more because the microphone circuitry is all meant to do the job that it's doing. I have a calibration tool that fits right onto the end of this and allows you to calibrate this before I get started. I have 2 different meters that I use. I have that Exitech, and then I have this one by American Recorder that also very similar functions. I wouldn't be surprised.
You got to cover your face.
Yeah, I know.
To focus. There you go.
I've heard that my entire life. So they both do about the same thing.
All right, let's roll back, and everybody's going on without us here.
Yeah, that's good. Somebody's got to have an interesting conversation.
Well, you can count on the people in 5-Watt World for that. Okay, so let's look at some guesses here. I'm actually going to do this on a screen where I can, if I do it over here in StreamYard, then I can throw them on the screen as I applaud or regale choices. Because I have to, and I should, to be fair, I should immediately say what mine and Jeff's guesses were. And we both guessed 50 dB, which would really be kind of quiet talking,
Yeah, it would be very quiet.
Very quiet talking. I'm a very quiet.
Earlier today, I took some measurements, and just the ambient noise in my room, it did not have a fan. It just had a duct for the air conditioning.
Yeah.
45 decibels.
Just nothing happening, just background.
So, central air, and the central air unit's nowhere near the room that I was in. It's just the duct coming from the central air that's 1 floor and probably 50 or 60 feet away at least. That room was 45 decibels.
Well, the air's running here now. So if we just give it a second, drop below.
I love that we're doing dead air. I'll keep talking.
Dead air. We're going to call it dead air.
We are
the
real broadcast professionals.
This meter only wants to go down to 60.
Yeah, you have some of those have a high and low setting. Yours, I believe, has that.
Yeah, I probably have to go back and change that. Anyway, It looked like it wanted to drop below 50. So, but still they're registering around that size. Okay, so
when they say that a whisper is 20, what did they say? 27 decibels, 25 decibels,
20 to 30. Like, right.
You can't. Yeah. I mean, my ears ring louder than that.
Right. All right. I'm going to walk down and just throw some of these up on the screen, and same as we go by.
50 is low.
And this is people guessing at bedroom volume, right?
And some of these are pretty realistic, actually.
Yeah, we're a smart group here.
And it really depends, as we'll talk about, what you're playing.
Yeah. Now Kurt's in Texas, so it's loud there.
Right.
We love you, Kurt. These guys are way smarter than me about this topic.
Yeah, it seems like people have actually measured this, because I'm looking at these and some of these are like within the range of what you'd expect.
Dave, we're going to come back to this. If you want quiet play, acoustic by yourself in the middle of the night. I'm not sure about the middle of the night part being an effect on the dB meter. We're going to get out the dB meter.
We've had them out.
We've had them out. We're going to use them. We're going to have David strum guitars.
I already pre-strummed some.
A little bit. Got them warmed up.
Mm-hmm. And appropriately, this is a rather quiet episode today.
I think that's pretty much.
We're walking the walk.
Dave Keltner, he's a whisper volume. I'll bet your semi-hollow that's in your icon pick is way louder than you think.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't not put this up from Sean because we're going to come back to this. You should be able to hear the transients from the electric guitar you're playing over the volume of the amp, which is kind of where the story goes.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yep, exactly. And
but Sean.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Sean would kind of know.
He's a professional. That's why he knows.
And then we have Lyle, the ringer among. I think we had a big laugh from Lyle when you said that the best thing about an iPhone DB app is the graphics. You got a big LOL in the chat at that moment. Okay, all right. So everybody did a pretty good job with that, and a whole bunch of people put it in the chat already, and it's absolutely true. When I started thinking about the jam, I was thinking about limiting it to 5 watts. And David perked right up and said about speaker efficiency.
Well, you actually were talking about 1 watt, so that cue didn't work as
well.
I
talked about 5 watts. You said, well, 1 watt is.
Oh, and that's when you came back with the 1 watt comment. That's right. So that was the point where I brought up speaker sensitivity to Keith, that if you limit everybody to 1 watt, they only can play at around 100 decibels with a regular 12-inch guitar speaker.
I was like,
and if you get 3 people doing that, you're probably at around 104 decibels together. So,
which was interesting, actually. Don't just skip by that. You were saying, so if you have one person at 100, and then you add a second person at another 100,
now you have 103.
Right. So it's the 3 dB thing.
And then if you go to 4, you have 106. But with 3, you probably have around 104, 104.5.
And then I was naive enough. And then I was naive enough to say that we want to be able to hear. I said, well, the goal is to be able to sing without PA. And you're like, yeah, you won't be able to do that.
I mean, you kind of could, but if everybody, it really depends on who you're playing with in that jam and what kind of a listener they are. Do they listen and say, I can't hear him singing, so I need to back off a little bit?
Yeah.
Or do they say, I can't hear him singing good?
Right. Well, we're gonna have to deal with it, and that'll be another episode to talk about what that rig is. I went ahead and jumped on the Celestion. Well, let's do the definition. So, speaker efficiency or sensitivity is 1 watt 1 watt into the speaker at 1 meter from the speaker. Is that right?
Yeah, and they're usually using something like a 1K tone. There's a lot of ways to fudge the measurement. What constitutes a watt, what constitutes whether they can just use one frequency, like just 1K, or they're using this at multiple frequencies and then averaging it. But let's just say everybody's playing fair. it's pretty common for guitar speakers to be between about 98 and 102 decibels with 1 watt, and you're measuring that what's happening with 1 watt with a microphone that's a full meter away from the speaker, and you're at 100 decibels with 1 watt.
Right, 1 watt. So I went on the Celestion website to get their definition, their Celestion's definition of how they talk about sensitivity, and this is from the sensitivity page. But I actually went and checked that a Celestion G12M greenback, a 25 watt greenback, has a sensitivity of 98 dB. And their sensitivity definition is: sensitivity measured in decibels is the figure we use to measure the comparative loudness of a speaker. Using an input signal of 1 watt, we measure the output signal from the speaker at a distance of 1 meter. There's actually a typo on their page. For a 12-inch guitar speaker, mètre, it's en français, mètre. For a 12-inch guitar speaker, this commonly gives us a value of between 96 and 100 dB. So my thinking is that I would, use a pair of catalysts, set it 1 watt. They actually don't have a 1 watt setting, so they have a half watt setting, but I don't know if we'll get anything clean at that. So David said all along, I'm going to have David do some strumming, and he did some pre-measurement. How many guitars could you fit into your little corner of the basement there?
I've just got 3 here right now. That's all you really need, because, spoiler, a lot of the solid bodies measure, approximately within a 3 decibel range.
Right. But David was teasing me that I really should, if I wanted to get a lot of click views, I should really name this the Tonewood debate. So you've got guitars with different body consistencies, constructions, right?
Well, yeah, kind of.
Okay.
Bolt-on versus glue.
Okay, right.
So the contestants here today are
PRS Vela.
PRS Vela with, of course, the truss rod cover removed, because I have a little bit of a fetish.
About having perfect action.
About having the truss rod exactly where I want it.
Yep.
And then there's a Highway 1 Stratocaster. I guess that's the first year, or 2002 or something like that.
Okay.
2002. Corey Wong started playing his after he saw me with this.
No doubt.
And I'll leave the other one as a spoiler, because it's the quiet one. It's the one that gets closest to the ideal that people want.
There you go. All right, so let's do some strumming here. And David's got the meter there.
Okay, so the meter's on, and the meter's about 1.5 feet away. I'm trying to approximate, how far your ear is from your guitar. And some guys, play like this, so they're right there.
Right.
So, oh great, I'm playing guitar live on the internet.
Uncle Left Eye from the beach in San Diego said, is there such a thing as beach volume? You would know, Lefty.
So
what'd you got? This is just the guitar. We don't have any amps involved today. 79.8. So a lot of you know what you're talking about.
And the guitar's not on top of the microphone.
Lyle actually jumped in and was very important. He says that when they're talking about the speaker definition, he says that's a clean 1 kilohertz sine. A 1 watt amp cannot produce a clean 1 kilohertz sine. Of course not.
All right, so we're to a Strat now.
The other one was 78.8. This one's 79.6.
Yeah, and that's a pretty consistent kind of number that you see. If I play harder, I can get an 82 or so out of a solid body.
Right.
Now, I won't try to demonstrate this as easily, but
I was going to ask you to. Sorry, go ahead.
The pick makes a huge difference. Not the type of pick, the fact that you're using a pick or using your nails. If you want to play a lot quieter, Don't play with a pick.
I was going to ask you to actually go ahead and do the strumming and then measure single notes. Doesn't sound like it makes a difference whether you pick up the Bella or the Strat, and measure the single notes so people have a sense of that difference, and then pick versus fingers.
I gotta wait for it to reset. I had turned it off.
You use good tools. Still 76.3. And you're not hitting the guitar particularly hard. That's the level you would pick? Play a line? Yeah.
Yeah. And I play a little too hard, and I'm just using a.
Again, you got to get in front of your face to get it to
focus. Anyway, it's just an Ultex 1.14. It's a pretty typical heavy-ish pick, but not crazy heavy. It's not a 2 millimeter or 3 millimeter pick or anything like that, and I'm not killing it.
As per what Sean said, is there a difference in dB volume for pointy end of the pick versus round corner?
A little, but it's not huge. There's a big difference when you go to this.
Yeah, that thing.
So if you don't pick with a plectrum,
there you go. Work on your Knopfler technique, boys and girls. 60.
Yeah. The microphone on the laptop actually is what triggered it to go higher just now.
Yeah, I saw that. Right. The speaker on the laptop.
So yeah, playing with flesh finger style, you can get the volume down from a solid body pretty consistently under 70 decibels. So taking 10 dB off is a huge difference. So
yeah,
it would allow you to move, if you want to be able to the person's point earlier who said something about the point where the transients of the unamplified electric solid body are not going over top of the amplifier, you probably want to be 3 to 6 decibels above that level if you really want to start feeling like you're not hearing the unamplified solid body acoustically mixing in. And it's something we're so adjusted to hearing that we blend it, and we essentially habituate the fact that we're hearing this blend. And we think of it as the whole, as the amplified sound, instead of thinking of what's there. And to some degree, we're pretty good at listening that way and being able to sort it out. Mm-hmm. But the initial transient does inform the rest of the sound significantly. So you end up with, if you're playing an unplugged solid body that's bright, most sounds that you dial in will appear bright to you until you go past the threshold and you're actually covering the unamplified guitar.
Yeah, that's where we're going to go next. I need to do my Truefire ad, and then we'll come back and we will go into the components of the soup, so to speak, the ingredients. There, get my metaphors cleaned up here of the soup. I'm going to put David in the green room for a second and do the Truefire ad. As everybody knows, I've been using Truefire for a long time before I reached out to them to be my sponsor. I've been using them for years and years, and actually had been taking Jeff McErlane's lessons for years before I ever knew who Jeff McErlane was as a person. I was actually the one who told Rick to call Jeff to get in touch with Robin for the interview. And then Robin, I can't do this. Then Rick gave me Jeff's contact information. So then I actually had access. And now I actually brainstorm with him, and I basically tell him that he should make videos about the stuff I want to learn this week on his own channel. But it was all about Truefire. And I still go back. I went back and took a lesson with a very young, youthful Jeff McErlane on the channel the other day. I've been currently working also on Robin Ford's deep groove classic blues, rhythm, sort of rhythm and comping things. There's over 45,000 lessons in the library covering all styles and levels. There's tab, notation, jam tracks, slow motion, looping to help you tailor the course to fit your own learning style. Using Grammy award-winning artists, top session players, and world-renowned instructors like my buddy Jeff, content at Truefire is clearly the best in the business. I decided to sign up a long time ago for the All Access Pass because I like to do lots of different kinds of things. I'll go do a bluegrass flat top guitar course and then play it on the electric that's sitting in the living room, or get my acoustic out if I'm coming up on the jam for the month and work on it that way. My iPad is always sitting on a music stand right there in the living room at the little practice corner. You can get a discount of 35% off courses using the code 5watt35. And you can use the link in the description. You should use the link in the description because then they know that it was me that sent you to Truefire. You can also use that to go and sign up for the All Access Pass. Same thing. Then they know you've come from me. You'd be supporting me and the channel, and you're also at the same time getting lots of quality lessons. So learn, practice, and play with Truefire. It's a daily part of my routine. Okay, let's get David back, and we will talk about other factors here. All right, so we were starting to get into the soup. So if I want to be able to have a sense of the difference, like I started this thing with, that pedal sounds really different with this guitar than it did with the Miras that I was playing that were out there before. And there were a whole bunch of things that we touched that you immediately just listed right off, because you're thinking all the time as you develop pedals and testing regimens how you do it. So the first thing you said, well, what do you know what strings they have on that guitar? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's got they shipped it with 10s. I think it's probably got 10s. I think they set it up for me and they didn't ask. So I assume it was 10s coming to me from Watchtower. That guitar came from Watchtower Guitars. Another person that Jeff introduced me to, another batch of guys, really great. So 10s louder than 9s, louder than 8s unplugged?
At certain frequencies, sure.
Sure, it's going to move, get back into the tone wood noise. It's going to move the, vibrate the top less.
The 10s on the 9s?
Yeah, the heavier.
It depends on the guitar you're playing, but with the solid body, there's no top.
Yeah. I meant it's just moving this is the classic Jeff thing. Jeff always did it great.
But yeah, the thicker your strings are, usually the louder they can be. It's going to depend on how much energy you put into them.
Right. Jeff's thing is, you hold the body and then you just pluck the E string, and if you can feel it down at the bottom, I'm holding my other hand on the bottom of the guitar, then he'll bother to take it down off the wall, and that's going to be more with a 10 than it's going to be with an 8. That's basically okay. That was a question.
I would think, there's more mass there. If you put the energy into the greater mass, and having more mass means it has a better chance of actually vibrating that larger piece of mass, which is the guitar.
Yeah. So string is one thing. Pointing versus rounded edge, not as big a deal. I had a question here come by. Question for Dave.
It makes a difference in the sound, pointy versus round, but as far as how much level you're going to get, the solid body guitar is mainly the level that you're getting from is really kind of upper mids and highs are what are triggering the decibel meter. It's not the lows, the parts that you might get from using a rounded end of a pick.
Right.
But both of them can be louder than most people want to be when they think of bedroom level. I guess that's what needs to be defined. I guess that's what we're going to get to here is, what are you trying to accomplish? If you're trying to just not blow your ears out, but hear the sound that you're working with, then headphones tends to be the answer there, because it helps to block out some of the unplugged guitar sound, and at the same time lets you hear as much as possible of your sound. The only problem is most headphones don't really sound like a representation of what's going on in the room. You would never want to set up your HX Stomp to be correct for stage by putting on a set of headphones and developing all of your sounds and then go out and play your variety gig. You probably would be unhappy.
Yeah. Let's do this question for you. Question for David. What about using a pick and playing softly? How much quieter is that compared to general picking? That's how I practice single note lines. I think go ahead.
So that really depends on what you want to get out of your practicing. One of the things that will happen if you do that is you become a lot better at playing quietly and softer. And if that's something you need to work on, yes, it'll make it quieter. And how many decibels? 6 or so. It's really hard to control that well enough that you're getting big, consistent, like 10 decibel differences. But it does mean that if you're somebody who plays very hard, that might be a good exercise for you. On the other hand, if you need to learn to play more deliberately and you're making yourself play quieter during your practice time that you have, that might not be good. It really, again, it depends on your objective. If you're disturbing someone else, you've got to do whatever is necessary.
Right.
If you're bothering your own hearing, then it's up to you how you want to address that.
Yeah. And actually, Chris Butler, almost on cue, had this question earlier, and I was going to bring it up, even though I wasn't going to be able to scroll back and find it. So thanks for putting it back here, Chris. He says, isn't bedroom volume more for the benefit of others around you outside the bedroom? So 1 foot away from the meter is not apropos, perhaps. And really, you're getting to the what is it in the, so what's it going to be in the next room with the door closed?
It's also a way that you can measure it. You can easily look up on Google or Google this, how much sound diminishes per meter or per foot. So once you have your initial measurement, you can then figure out how far away your other person is and how much they may hear it. And, the reflections of your room matter and how absorbent they are. But, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things, I had a home studio space. I made a video about it a long time ago, where I set up a room that was ready to go and have people in to play. And I was hanging a bunch of, the panels are all from that experiment are all in the basement now. I had this sense that a lot of people, and some people put it in the chat, that you need sound absorption. And room treatment is not sound absorption as much as it is sound diffusion. Like
it depends. It can be sound absorption.
The Orlex panels that I had are, all those waffled things, that's like breaking up the signal, not, like it's not a 6-inch panel of, bass trap in the corner kind of thing.
Yeah, that absorbs and it stops waves from moving. There's different things that happen in corners that are probably beyond discussion here before I get into it.
Right.
Somebody will break out that my math isn't perfect. But basically, there are things that diffuse, there are things that absorb, and then there are things that are meant to, and they have a lot of mass, try to stop sounds from making it to the next room and transmitting.
Right. Yeah. Somebody had a question here. They wanted to know, by the way, how many decibels does John, who we always see, turn on his amp in his room? I know that John, and he says this all the time, he records almost all the time with Helix Native, and I happen to know that it's barely on. So what you're hearing, of course, is what's in the box, not what's in the room. And actually, there's times like just today's video, one of John's videos, very recently, you'll see his daughter Elodie like climbing up on his knee, and it looks like he's shredding in it. And we have the impression that it's loud in the room. And this little kid is like, "What are you doing, Dad? What's going on?" I'm always rooting for Elodie to reach up and turn the volume knob down, as she has done in past videos, but I'm a contrarian. So I happen to know that's very quiet, that John is playing very quietly in the room. Because usually when he's able to do that, it's a time of the day when he's supposed to be keeping an eye on Elodie. That's why there's stuffed sharks and stuff. Well, maybe those are John's toys. I don't know. Anyway. Let's talk about ways to avoid hearing your unamplified guitar as part of your, in the living room, I'm often dialing my delays and stuff in my HX Stomp. And now I'm realizing that the transients and stuff are coming off the unamplified guitar, that's affecting what's actually going to come out of an amp. And actually at the volumes that I'm talking about doing in these jams, that's going to be a part of it anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, if it's actually your reality, then it's perfectly fine to embrace the fact that you have some unamplified sound mixing with it.
Right.
So, I mean, it's pretty obvious what the two are. You either need to be able to isolate yourself with headphones, or you play louder than the unamplified sound. There aren't a lot of other choices other than to try to play quieter, but when you play quieter, it changes the sound.
When you say a different dynamic. When you say play quieter, are you talking about the touch on the guitar or turn your volume up on your amp? Oh, okay. Right. Yeah. Or turn the amp up to the point where you're not hearing the guitar anymore.
Right. So that's the thing. And if you really do want to play, when people talk about, for the most part, listening to their guitar and comparing it to like the amplified sound versus the unamplified sound, you really have to get to, for most guitars, into the 80s decibel range. For a player who doesn't play as hard, maybe lighter strings, maybe a lighter pick, maybe they can get away with 80 decibels. And you're just getting into the beginnings there of what OSHA would say, well, don't play too long. If you care about that, I would say that you should. I try to keep my listening environment in the 70s as far as the level is concerned. And I always deal with a certain amount of unamplified guitar in the environment.
Yeah.
because headphones don't lead me to good answers when it comes to designing audio products. If I was only designing for headphone use, then it would be exactly how I'd work. But most people that's not how they're going. And
Right.
people want to be able to use them live. So
Yeah, we'll have to have you put up a shot of your testing station on Instagram so folks can see not the messiness of your desktop so much
hey,
as
I wasn't going
hey,
there.
hey, but just how, where you have your amp compared to where you're sitting, and take the shot from where you're looking down, because the amp is underneath the table. I mean, but at the edge of the table, but it's down. I don't know, how many feet do you think it is from your ears down to that speaker?
About 2.5 or 3.
Yeah, it's a deluxe, everybody. So it's a deluxe 65 reissue. Yes, stock, except for the
Yep.
speaker.
Yeah, the speaker currently is an ET65.
Yeah, right. So let's talk about moving air, because this was a really fun moment, and somebody actually just brought it up. Somebody says small speakers allow you to have more volume in the room without going through walls and disturbing others.
As a generalization, that's not a bad thing. Yeah.
And why is that?
Well, the larger the diameter of the speaker, if all things are equal, so let's say the voice coil is the same, the excursion of the speaker same, and so all the components of them are same.
Yeah.
If you have a larger speaker, you're going to move more air, as long as the sensitivity is similar.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other parameters about making something sound bigger or louder. But if we're talking about all equal, the generalization is a bigger speaker is going to produce a bigger sound, usually some more lows, and 210s against 112 sometimes is a bigger sound. And although people see the 12-inch speaker and think, shouldn't that be bigger because of a larger overall diameter, there's actually more air being moved by the 10, again, if all things are equal.
Yeah.
And so on. 410s is actually more overall surface area on the speakers, if all things are equal, than what the 212s are.
I watched a rig rundown earlier today, just popped up in my feed while I was eating my sandwich, and it was with Brent Mason, and he had a silver panel super reverb that somebody there in Nashville had breathed on a little bit, and he had a 64 twin reverb that was his backup. But he was mostly using the super, and he said how much punchier the super was, even though the wattage was less. And I was sitting there in the wake of our conversation about this going, oh, you got 410s, instead of 212s.
And there's other variables in there. Usually 10-inch speakers have lighter cones and lighter overall structure. And so they tend to be a little bit more responsive. They're not having to move as much weight, essentially. And so that can change how punchy something feels. 10s often feel punchy. Bass players a lot of times feel that a 10 is a much punchier way to go than a single 15 or a single 18.
Yeah. And I want to come back to the bass thing, but Victor Beebe is asking a question that came up around my D25, and Sean and I have talked about this. You can use a less efficient speaker. When I originally talked to those guys about building a combo, let me get that back off there. I was imagining that amp with a Neo creamback, and they said it was just not as full sounding across the range of volume that you would use the amp at. It's a less efficient speaker than the Vintage 30 that they ended up deciding on in the end. Is it a good, hugely relative term, subjective as hell. So is it a good idea to put a less efficient speaker in an amp that you're going to be using mostly at home because it's going to be quieter?
If the object is to be able to deal with, if we're excluding the unamplified electric guitar as part of what's driving your sound levels, which is that 80 decibel threshold, if the reason you're playing quietly is to try not to disturb someone else, then it's really tough to say with an electric guitar setup with an amplifier, the best thing to do. Yeah, I would move less air overall. I'd probably be more likely to use a 10 or an 8. And 8's really small sounding, but really if you're trying not to disturb someone else, but you must have an amplifier,
right,
you're trying not to, move as much air and play as loudly. But there's other things that you can do that are much better. But so not plugging in is obviously a good way to go. It's a good way to practice. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a good way to develop your sound. And it's good to be aware of the thing you're not allowed to say on most, forums these days, which is that unamplified solid body guitars have an impact on your sound. The fact that it's hard to play over the level of them means that if you have a very balanced sounding Strat or a Les Paul, as opposed to something that's strident or very dark, the unamplified guitar that mixes with your amplifier will be more pleasing sounding. You can't help but get part acoustic sound going. So when you see, people being shouted down because they want a decent sounding instrument unplugged, it discounts, the idea that you don't always play at 90 dB. I mean, if you're only a stage guy and you only play like 86 decibels or louder, way louder, or only with headphones, then yeah, maybe you can make your argument. But really, unamplified guitar, tone woods, they matter in achieving a balance of what you're probably going to hear, which is the accidental or unintended acoustics of your instrument blended with your regular electric sound. And so in what you were saying earlier, as far as, dealing with that, whether efficiency is it's a combination of things. It's, have an instrument that you can play the amplifier quiet and you're not going to be disappointed in the sound of your unamplified instrument that blends with it. But should we get to what the grand champion was of playing, like if you didn't want to disturb someone else?
I keep glancing at the time because I'm saving it. I did want to say something that Veronica pointed out earlier. She said she uses an attenuator. That was a way to deal with the maximum volume of the rig that she's using. And I think she's talking about, because I've corresponded with her, she's talking about having fewer instruments, fewer amps, and being able to use them for more varied purposes. And one of them was having an attenuator so you can bring it down into a volume level that works for the sound you want.
It tremendously depends on what your goal is and what you can accept. If you're playing a 50 watt amp and you need to attenuate it to the point that it's 80 dB maximum,
right,
your tone's going to take a big hit. I think you're better off just using a good sounding clean amp and using good sounding pedals. Not an advertisement for this guy.
But it should be. Somebody says, this is something I was going to ask. What about placement of the amp? Because I mentioned it in your test rig, where to place the speaker, not on the floor. Put them up on a chair. If you want to,
I can change how much bottom you have. And I mean, some guitar players famously always put their amps on folding chairs. I think Joe Walsh was one of the guys who always had part of his guitar sound that was always on like an aluminum folding chair or something like that. I can't remember, but it was a folding chair.
They carry those on the road. The aluminum.
I would think. I mean,
brand.
It's easier than sorting out the green M&Ms. But I usually like to have the amp on the floor because it does give me a little bit more of the weight to the sound because it acoustically couples essentially.
Right.
And you end up with a sound that's more like a stage environment. Most guitar amps are going to be on the ground.
Yeah. All right. It's 4:54. Let's bring out the winner in the bedroom volume, not disturb anybody else, testing here.
No.
One of the three guitars that David had.
So here's the one that when I played it with a pick, and I'll give you some quick measurements first.
All right.
My Collings orchestra model guitar, an OM1, when played with a pick, was 88 decibels. So only 8 decibels louder than an unplugged, now much fuller sounding and a lot more volume in the lows than what the unplugged solid bodies were. But still, the maximum transient that I was dealing with was about 88 dB. Playing the Collings a lot lighter brought it down to 81.7 decibels.
That's a big change.
A Ramirez nylon string guitar, an S1, produced 81 decibels, nylon strings.
Played with your fingers, I assume.
With flesh, yeah, not with fingernails, with flesh. And if I played it lightly with flesh, I got it down to 81 decibels.
Well, let's just touch on this because David has a background in classical guitar. You play a lot of classical guitar, and you told me before that you play it's Tarrega, where more flesh, less fingernail, right?
Tarrega was the one that stopped using his nails and moved to flesh later in his life.
Right. So he's generally kind of thought of that way. And you're generally in that school of playing on a classical, is that right?
Yeah, I don't generate good solid nails on my own. I don't like having to keep up with gluing nails on my fingers. And really, it's more level than I need. You can produce a surprising amount of level with a nylon string guitar. And since I only play for myself, I really like that.
There you go.
and a few more addendums to what I measured earlier today before we got started. Both the Strat and the Tele produced around 74 decibels when playing very lightly, or playing just like when you play blues chords, you're often kind of playing just 3-note chords. You're not playing big strums like I was playing earlier.
Yep.
And you could keep it down to about 75. Also playing without a pick, you could get it under 70 dB. Again, playing lightly. So it depends on the sensitivity of the player too. But what beat all of them handily was one of these Yamaha silent. No, I'm killing my mic. You'll see.
Come on. That's a little close. You got to pull back a little, I think. Give the camera a chance. There it goes.
There so it's a nylon string guitar.
Yeah.
And a nylon string guitar is a really good choice if you're trying not to disturb someone else, especially if you need to work on your finger saw playing or finger picking. So that's only 61 decibels. Playing it with reckless abandon. Just
playing,
just playing it regularly, not thinking about it at all. Even playing it with a pick and playing it rather hard, between 67 and 71 was the hardest I could generate, the loudest I could generate playing it hard. So these nylon string Yamaha, what do they call them? Silent guitars? I can't remember.
It's called the silent. Yep, they're called
and
silent.
They're not expensive. They're not expensive at all. People spend more than the amount of money you'll spend for one of these used on pedals, on cheap. We're considered cheap pedals. I think I spent $250, $300 for one of these guys used on like the Guitar Center website. So by far. And
that has a preamp in it and a headphone out, right?
And reverb.
To boot.
And a headphone out. Yeah. So it's got, things that, I mean, I'm not going to say that it sounds exactly like or anything like your regular electric playing with distortion and everything like that.
Right.
But if you just need to play, if you really do have the proverbial baby sleeping, and especially if you need to be able to keep an eye on them and the door isn't closed between the two rooms, that works. It works way better than any electric guitar will. The next step up is solid body guitars unamplified, and for all the people who find when they need to be quiet that it's an excuse to buy themselves a Collings. Collings is a great guitar. Buy one, of course, but not because you want it to be quiet. It's going to be pretty hard to keep your Collings acoustic guitar anywhere near as quiet as you can keep your solid body that's not plugged in.
I was surprised nobody brought it up. Did you test your semi-hollows?
I did. They're about an extra 3 decibels.
Louder.
Yeah. But you really have to work pretty hard to get there too. Overall, they're mainly bringing in more mids and low mids unamplified than what you could hear with a solid body. But the initial transient, which is so dependent on the string and what makes the meter move, those frequencies are higher. So they tend to be very similar. What actually moves the meter?
Interesting. All right. Well, we're wrapping up here on the hour. Anybody? Mike Null says, based on today, he's getting rid of his tone pump. Ah, you're breaking my heart. People might not know that's a Barber. I assume he's joking around. That's a Barber pedal. Maybe I shouldn't have thrown it on screen. We'll block Mike from now. No, I'm kidding. And then my buddy in Vista Cycling Tuscany, when your neighbors have put up their apartment for sale, you know you're loud enough. Well, there you go.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess the takeaway is there's a lot of different expectations that a person can have when they say the words, bedroom level. Is it them? The only one in the apartment playing in the bedroom and there's no one else to disturb, and it's a neighbor that they're worried about? Is there somebody else in the room?
Yep.
Are they worried about getting a good sound at a low level? Or are they just worried about being able to practice? And I hope we covered enough of that you get some different indications of, with some actual metrics, what's actually happening, because your ears will just tell you whatever sounds best is best.
Right. Carol, it brings us back to, it probably has more to do with, depends on who's near the bedroom or in the building even, that matters around your volume and stuff. But we were trying to actually talk about a definition of bedroom volume as what could you play there and really not disturb anyone, and what those numbers look like. Because I was really surprised by what the numbers were, and how much we all need. I was saying that one of my favorite things that happened along the years of the pedal show, was when they got the dB meter in the back corner. And it's just so enlightening every single show. So great.
I guess that should be the takeaway: is use a
Yeah.
meter to test the results. You can't do this by wattage.
Yep.
It's difficult to do it using speaker sensitivity. It's difficult to do it even with the number of speakers. Those are generalities.
Yep.
But when you get down to controlling the overall level that you're working with and protecting your hearing,
Yep.
not disturbing somebody else, and still being able to work on a good sound without your guitar being in there, you have to take some measurements about what's happening in your own environment and ask yourself what you're trying to do.
Yeah, my one of my friends of 5 Watt guys that I do a video chat with every month has that very meter in a corner, like on a corner shelf right next to his amps. He glances over, and he has a very diligent practice regimen, and so he's very diligent about keeping his hearing going. Yeah, misspeak. I don't know why I said that. Anyway, keeping his hearing going. So I hope everybody enjoyed that. Paul is saying that I think those are new prices, Paul. Got to get there and look for a used one.
Oh yeah, this is the one that I have is a lower end model. They probably wrote the model number in smaller lettering than I can look at. It's a PA-1E, and then it says or PA-3B, I think that says, or PA-D09. Oh no, there's the adapters for this. I'm sorry, I just read the wrong thing.
There you go.
I don't know what model I have, but it's the cheapest silent one they make, and you can find them used on Reverb and Guitar Center and probably Sweetwater's used page.
Right.
Pretty inexpensively. Again, I think I only paid a couple hundred, maybe $300 for this. And hold on.
That often has to do with patience as well. Being willing to wait.
It actually breaks down to that big, so it really travels easy too. So this is the guitar I take to the beach with me too. I get to practice as much as I want to. I don't disturb anybody else. As a matter of fact, they usually tell me they can't hear me and they're bothered by not being able to be entertained. I say, don't worry, my playing's not entertaining.
I used to have an amp. And a guitar in my office at UVM, and if I played at bedroom volumes in my office, they would come when the door was closed. It was lunchtime. I was trying to push the reset button, and they would come and they were like, either turn down or open the door and turn up. We're glad to hear you play, but that sort of in the room next to you, far away, I can't quite tell what song you're playing. We don't want to hear that. So it was interesting. And then we're back to what are you trying to keep it down for? So anyway, David, thank you for being on again.
Anytime.
I really enjoy it. Say again?
I said, thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. Yes. And thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to let that clip run again to run us out. And we'll see you next week. Working on a new video. Hope you liked the remake of the Les Paul video with all the great playing clips from my years of working with Jeff and company and John. So if you haven't seen that, you go back and check it out. It is very similar, but I did edit the script and hopefully included some of the stuff that I learned over time. So go check that out. Until next time, thanks for being a part of the 5 Watt world, and I'll see you later.